Hello everyone, and welcome to Road to Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, a set of videos to celebrate its upcoming release, by talking non-stop about my favorite game of all time and what I love about it. Today I want to focus a little bit on why I think FF7 is impactful for many of us, and what I love Rebirth to focus on too. And if I have to summarize it, the answer or reason would be its character-driven stories, so we can talk about them a little bit. These stories are known for having a focus on character developments and journeys than they are on the overarching plot, as you could guess with the name, and more importantly, allows you to resonate with fleshed out characters on a personal level as they go through different experiences that, while unrealistic on a superficial level, can be very relatable to many of us during our own journey in life, as it certainly was for me. And I'm not referring straight up to the high standard or literary qualities of the game, I leave that to the experts on that, but rather how this focus made an emotional impact and attachment to the players for one reason or another. So what I want to do here, to follow some sort of order, is to revisit and explore each character's important moments in the game, and their stories to contextualize those scenes that define them and make them grow, and why I find them so impactful. But also the interactions between them, as that's very important too. So let's start exploring why the characters in Final Fantasy VII and their individual arcs make this game so special, over the main plot alone. I just want to talk about the things that I love and why. Also, did I mention to like and subscribe? I would like that, thank you. Now, let's start with our protagonist impact. Cloud's STRIFE is the very main character of the game, so it's expected for the biggest focus to be on him. As mentioned, when we have a character-driven story, it means we are going to be presented with a developed backstory and also the growth we are able to see through the course of the game to make him more compelling. And oh boy, he does have a whole journey. As a protagonist who we follow constantly, it's important for him to be presented as someone who is cool, and at the very least not a pain in the ass to be around. Granted, in the first impressions he's pretty hostile against Barret and uninterested in his very passionate speeches and cause, but not exactly stubborn about everything, as it only takes a little nudge from Tifa and triggers some past memories of his childhood and the promises they made to start make some small gestures, while also showing that during his past he seemed to be a somewhat shy boy with dreams and objectives in life like anyone else, which helps to show another side of him to us. And you still are able to see these tidbits through the adventure in the Midgar section of the game, which is the first act of the game. Yes, he tries to act cool and cocky when he can, and that might be the superficial perception that some may have if they don't pay enough attention, but he's still open to help this newly met flower girl from the Turks, and quickly befriend her, caring enough to both help her for her safety and listen to her as she suspiciously asks about some soldier members. Now, there's something very important about Cloud's image, and that's how many times he is referred to as a dork. No matter how many times he tries to act or be a cool hero to the rescue, he'll end up in slightly ridiculous situations. During Midgar alone, as much as he wants to lead a mission to save Tifa from Corneo's mansion while not putting Aerith in danger for no reason, he'll still end up wearing a pretty dress for the occasion. Potentially with some dubious moments at the Honeybee Inn inclusive. Only to be in the same situation as the ladies on a par with each other, or even worse. And that's something often depicted during the game, almost as a common joke. If there's something to do, Cloud is our guy. When we need to ride a dolphin to reach the tower to Upper Junon, when it's time to learn how to perform on a military parade so we don't mess up the show, or fail in the process, or if the only way to escape a prison is jumping on a chocobo and take part in a race where spectacle is the priority. Cloud will always be our guy for those. Not to mention the things you can do on the side, like making his holographic self fight with luchadores and such. In summary, Cloud as a character will do anything he can to be this cool person that any 15-year-old would watch and aspire to be, but fail and show his uncool side more often than not in the process. And that is relevant. Remake has done well in that sense. In terms of his motivations to start this journey of leaving Midgar, as we arrive to the immediate town of Colm, we are told by him more of his story background, how he tagged along his childhood hero Sephiroth to his first mission as soldier to prove himself, coincidentally at his own hometown of Nibelheim. And the tragedy that brought that day, when Sephiroth fell into madness and burned down the village, causing the death of its villagers, including his mother and Tifa's father. One key factor in this flashback story is that it ends abruptly, as he doesn't remember what happened next exactly, so things are still unclear in that regard. Especially now that Sephiroth has apparently appeared at Shinra HQ, and we are on a mission to search for him, in what is known as the official second arc of Final Fantasy VII called The Pursuit, the chase of the Black Cape Man around the world, basically what Rebirth will cover. So we have our protagonist's motivations tied to a personal history with the main antagonist, which also happens to be linked with the planet's fate, therefore tying up the main plot to the main protagonist's personal quest. If there's something the flashback story taught to us, the player, is that Sephiroth is far from our league in power levels. He impales a giant Midgardsorm, as we run away from them in our chocobos, but we still make progress. The Turks mention us where to go at the Mithril mines, we then follow Rufus at his cargo ship where we apparently clash against Sephiroth for the first time, although his speech seems to be odd and doesn't seem to remember Cloud, and even are told by the likes of Theo or Hojo, as he mumbles to himself, where to go next in this mission. All of this to add to this somewhat straightforward chase and objective Cloud has, at least until we arrive at a very special place. While so far at this point of the game, it's nice to follow a main character that has this uncool dorky side, the moments that made me really curious about Cloud arrived first at the Temple of the Ancients. Again, as a character-driven story, one of the most important aspects is to have a focus on an internal conflict, not just an external one like it can be the potential dangers of Sephiroth or Rufus Shinra at this point. So at the end of this dungeon, as we interact with Sephiroth and his speech of summoning Meteor to inflict a wound to the planet, we see for the first time a completely change in Cloud's demeanor. After hearing the words "wake up", we find Cloud laughing in an odd way, mumbling words that resemble what Sephiroth just told us: black materia, summon Meteor, etc. And if that's not enough to creep out the player, we get to see this fantastic use of his polygon models to show a very clear internal struggle. To make it better, well, worse, when he apparently talked himself out of it, he turns and talks to the rest of the party as if nothing just happened, and they get in a silent agreement to not push this topic too much and that nothing happened. I personally knew at this moment, where something was clearly off about him, that I was more interested in Cloud as a character and protagonist than ever before. And it does get even worse. A couple of boss fights later, once we get the black materia in our hands, we listen once again to the words "wake up", and this time we have two things to pay attention to. One is once again how Cloud's model falls to his knees struggling with himself and apparently follows Sephiroth's words, as he stands up to move on its own and gives this black materia to him willingly. As that happens, we, the player, are able to control not that model, but the new one that just appeared, that is the young version of Cloud. We are able to move around and by pressing buttons, triggering screams to try to stop himself, but to no avail. This representation of Kid Cloud will be important. After Sephiroth leaves, this time Cloud is conscious about what he has just done, and while in disbelief with himself and his actions, he starts to lose it, to the point that starts lashing against Aerith herself, who tried to insist that nothing wrong just happened, before being knocked down by the others. This series of events show us another side of our protagonist. But what does that mean to him? How is he able to push forward after experiencing this stuff? And how is this initial image of him going to change? Well, to begin with, we first see Cloud's quote-unquote dream, where he's able to have a conversation with Aerith at the Sleeping Forest, apologizing for what just happened. And upon learning that he couldn't help himself, she decides to go on her own as she thinks it's her responsibility as the last Cetra and Cloud can focus on getting better instead. We can focus on her motivations and own journey later. But more interesting, Sephiroth can invade these dreams too apparently, and says a couple of lines as if Cloud and him are accomplices in this mission to stop her bothering with their plan? Interesting bit at the end there. What's really meaningful to me in terms of his character It's his attitude when he wakes up and gets to talk to Barret and Tifa, who help him by staying at his side until he wakes up, supporting him each in their own way. During this conversation, as the new plan is to go reach Aerith and help her not to be alone, Cloud is not that confident, and after what happened, he shows and says that he is scared of himself, of what he's capable to do, and why that is happening. Probably for the first time in the game, this initially cool and cocky character at some points is showing himself openly vulnerable and afraid of what he's feeling, contemplating where to run if the option is to escape these fears he has. While still not confident, Tifa and Barret reassure him that they'll be there if a similar situation happens again. When they are able to finally reach Aerith, he decides he wants to go alone, as a sign to challenge himself. But as soon as we get close, we get a similar episode that not only affects Cloud, but us, the player too, as we still have control over him, but with no other option than to take out our sword, take position to attack, and no matter all the attempts that Cloud has during his internal struggle to stop himself, almost killing Aerith if not for our friends that stop us. Granted, the conclusion is still not the best one. And after Sephiroth kills Aerith, he still has some words we can consider interesting if we are not shocked by what just happened. Questioning Cloud's ability to feel at all, because he is a puppet. Once back at the resting spot, we have another moment that resonated strongly with me. As Cloud once again opens up to everyone, acknowledging that he's afraid of himself and the struggles he's having for not understanding a side of him. How he thought he acts by his own will, but still something happens that is not himself anymore, and even attempted to kill Aerith with his own hands. And says one of my favorite phrases of him, "There's someone inside me, someone who's not really me." And while accepting he should quit this journey, he continues asking everyone for their cooperation, and to stop him from doing something terrible if the moment arrives. Proceeding to continue their journey to stop Sephiroth at the northern crater, with the very defeated... Let's go. Now, some people at the moment of summarize the story for some reason love to stop here, being like, yeah, he gets better and kills Sephiroth at the end. But no, it gets way worse for him in the following events. But on a good note, it also means that we get a satisfying recovery. Reaching the northern crater could mean a final confrontation against Sephiroth after this bigger and bigger personal vendetta. But what's fascinating here is that we are presented with the biggest plot twist of Final Fantasy VII instead, or part of it. First of all, the Sephiroth we were chasing was a physical manifestation of Genova, although with Sephiroth's willpower. But moving further, we find ourselves in an illusion of the Nibelheim flashback, that one we talked about when establishing Cloud's motivation to start this chase around the world, with one small but significant difference. While the models and animations are the exact same we saw, the young soldier arriving is not Cloud, but the black-haired guy. As a playable experience, this is really cool, because we get to slightly play inside this illusion flashback, moving and questioning why we are watching this. We even have to relive the moments of the burning town, with again, the black-haired fella taking Cloud's place. And this is where the personal story of Tifa Lockhart gets fully intertwined with Cloud's, as they are the two mandatory characters to play through this part, and it's relevant because while Cloud acts very sure of himself that these illusions are created just to mess with him by replacing his place with another person, Tifa's reactions are more panicky. She shows hesitation, fear, a little bit of desperation to convince Cloud this is not real, even when he believes it more than her, and pleading Sephiroth to stop this. He, as the professional gaslighter that he is, will push this illusion further, saying that this is actually the truth, that he wasn't here 5 years ago, and attempts to bring out the real Cloud, that one who gave the black materia to him, even stating that he is just merely an artificial being constructed by Hojo, a Sephiroth copy just like those creepy black-caped men we see around. To that, a desperate Tifa tries to convince Cloud that couldn't be the case, as they share a past at Nibelheim, like the promise at the Starry Night, even if Cloud's act unamused by Sephiroth's words. Sephiroth takes advantage of this reaction to question her instead, and threatens to show what's in her heart instead. And this is the moment that Cloud starts to react about it. opening up that yes, he's been dealing with some episodes that truly doesn't understand himself, but he still is the young boy that grew up with her. And her words, long time no see, when they reunited back at Midgar, will always support him on that. As long as it's her, as long as she's supporting him, he would never lose faith in himself. No matter what anyone else says, but her. Upon her confusion and mingled thoughts, Sephiroth tries to put the final nail in the coffin, convincing them that with Genoa powers to manifest out of the memories of others, the Cloud that Tifa knew and him right here right now are actually different people, that he doesn't even have a name. And we have a cool parallel of Tifa desperately asking Cloud to not think too much about it on one side, and Sephiroth demanding to think about it on the other. And for a good reason, because as Cloud starts to recollect his journey as a first-class soldier, he starts to break as the gaps in his memory doesn't allow him to have faith in him anymore, until slowly and even unconsciously starts to lose himself and accept Sephiroth's words and version as the truth. The conclusion of this couldn't be sadder for our protagonist. In the immediate sequence involving him, his speech towards anyone present is different. His behavior is of one who feels fully defeated, almost unconsciously accepting that he is indeed a puppet. There's this cool moment that the game does many times, that it's the use of his polygon model movement. How he holds himself as he's trying to stop himself and not embrace this downfall he's leading up to, which makes things sadder for us to watch. Now that he has the black materia ready to give it to Sephiroth's real body who lies here, Cloud addresses everyone and tells them he is very sorry, especially to Tifa, as he couldn't live up to be the real Cloud she remembered, hoping one day she could find him. And there's a very important detail during that we couldn't notice while playing the localized version. In the original script, Cloud refers to Tifa as Tifa-san, talking in a formal manner to her when he never did before, showing some new distance between them. And what hurts even more is that he mentions Cloud-kun, as if he's talking about a different person, acknowledging and accepting that he doesn't believe to be the real Cloud. After he once again struggles to move and try to resist himself a couple of times, we learn that all this time we never were chasing Sephiroth around the world, but rather we were being summoned by him here at the crater, where the reunion takes place, along any other Black Cape man, no different from them. Cloud finally gives the black materia to the real Sephiroth, triggering both the awakening of the weapons and the meteor to threaten the planet, falling into the crater as the party and Shinra escapes in the airship. As we said before and insist, Cloud STRIFE is the main character, someone who at the very least should not be a pain to follow, but as we see the world through his eyes, we are engaged to him as he carries the story. He is the character in which the game will be developing a well-defined point of view. So now, suddenly, not only he's not with us anymore, with no set of destination or objective in mind, but also the backstory and the information we knew through him seemed to be untrue, changing completely what we were following until now. Our main character is gone, and the knowledge we had prior also may be gone too. So there comes one character that with the rest of the party's support will have the resolution to search for Cloud, as she refuses to believe that what just happened through Sephiroth manipulation is the one true reality, and that is, of course, Tifa Lockhart. They will be able to find Cloud. With Tifa leading and excitedly about it, they meet with this new reality. Cloud was found unconscious and kept at the hospital, as he for the last days has been in a comatose state, unable to move, think or talk in a comprehensible way, with his consciousness far away from us. Our protagonist, the cool guy with the cool sword, who was able to surpass any obstacle with ease and defeat every challenge ahead of him, is now a hollow version of himself, mentally broken, and also making us doubt if he was even real to begin with. Luckily, as Tifa has a newly found resolution to fully believe in the memories they shared, she decides to stay and take care of him until he is recovered. At first it doesn't seem to be any type of progress, but after a weapon rampage and in an attempt to escape, they both fall into the livestream, Usually that would be a bad thing, but after Tifa starts hearing voices that are torturing her and screams for help from Cloud, she finds herself suddenly in a weird place, surrounded by many images of Cloud and moments in time and space, which we would learn is his subconscious. We can see a very struggling big image of Cloud, as he's trying to search for himself, which manifests in the real world as his comatose body. This would be the start of Kitase, Nomura's and my favorite moment of Final Fantasy VII story. The journey where Tifa helps Cloud inside of his mind to search for his real self and the true reveals of the past. We start by the famous Nibelheim flashback. Cloud is still convinced he was there as the young soldier helping Sephiroth, but the resolved Tifa shares to him her truth. She doesn't remember him in there. While the story he shared was accurate, she waited for him to appear, but the Cloud she remembered and left to become a soldier never came that day, and she was slightly heartbroken about it. So the first step to find himself is to accept this, and slowly getting to learn which memory is true and which one is not. The second place they visit is the promise they made under the stars, at the water tower. The images shown from Cloud's memories match perfectly to what Tifa remembers, and she is convinced that the Cloud from her childhood and him are the same person, but he still doesn't believe in himself. Therefore, they need a personal important memory of him, so she can check and learn that if it matches with her own memories, then they would confirm he is the real Cloud. Tifa suggests the reason to leave and become a soldier, and upon answering that he was devastated, that he wanted to be noticed, and most exactly, he wanted to be noticed by her, another image of him appears to guide her, and it's Cloud's young self. Remember how this little friend appeared before and we could control him to try to stop his present self? He is back. This child version would represent his true self, trapped deep in his subconscious, and will reveal Tifa a very secret and tender memory he has. It was the day Tifa's mom passed away, Cloud's first time at her room along her usual group of friends, revealing that he always thought they were stupid, but also how in reality he always secretly wished to be able to be part of the group, and having friends too, as he was a reserved, lonely kid that didn't attempt to join or was called to join them. On that day, as it is said that the spirit of the dead goes through the mountains of Nibel, Tifa, mourning her loss, attempts to search for her mother, and as every other kid starts to leave her, it is Cloud the only one who follows her and takes care of her. Eventually, they will fall and get on an accident that would leave him with some scrapped knees only, but Tifa severely damaged for days. The idea of not being able to protect her traumatized him. He felt he had to be strong, so he could be acknowledged by the person he admired, and save her when in danger, even if Tifa never knew nor blamed him for anything. From that day forward, he would easily get into fights with everyone, and after learning about the soldier hero Sephiroth, he'll have a new objective of following his steps, so he too can become her hero, a desire he always kept for himself. While this revelation might be too much to process for Tifa, who wasn't aware of most of this, it does confirm for sure that Cloud is indeed real, as they share those memories together, and it wasn't Genova the one creating them, and we are very close to fully find all the truth of the past, by going back to that fateful day 5 years ago. And at the moment Sephiroth slashed her, he remembers that it was his friend Zack Fair, the one who came instead, but he saw everything. These memories were accurate because he witnessed them. After Zack was defeated by Sephiroth, a mysterious figure appears. A Shinra Grant runs in and stabs Sephiroth with the Buster Sword, revealing that it was him under the helmet. He was always there. He was watching over Tifa all along, next to the two soldiers. But the truth is that he never made it into one. He was a Shinra Grant, not able to reach his objectives and dreams of being a first class, strong enough to protect those who love, shy and insecure to cover his own face once they arrived to Nibelheim out of shame, so no one, especially Tifa, could see him fail his objective after leaving town promising to become one. And yet, this weak, fragile, insecure normal boy, out of desperation and willpower to protect what he has left, was the one able to overpower Sephiroth long enough to throw him at the livestream and fulfill the promise he made under the stars, saving Tifa when she was in a pinch, before fainting and being captive for 5 years. The learning of the truth makes all the images of Cloud to start moving, merging and becoming one, and for the first time in the game, Cloud's STRIFE, the real Cloud's STRIFE, is full and back with the rest of the group. We later can learn that in those years being captive, the exposure to Mako to a weak-minded person like him made him unable to move and in a comatose state too, and only after the murder of his friend Zack, as he was protecting him, and the trauma that this caused, the cells in his body reacted and created this fake persona with unconsciously merged thoughts, that eventually established after meeting Tifa at Midgar once again. For me personally, the idea that the main character that was firstly presented as a cool, strong, reliable warrior that could lead a mission towards the most threatening of enemies was actually a young timid boy who was hesitant to make friends as a kid or even talk to his crush who lives next door, that attempts to become his ideal hero just to fail during it and be ashamed to even show his face, was really meaningful to me. I was 15 too. The idea of following a protagonist who's cool as heck no matter what he does is appealing, so I can self-insert in him and pretend I'm as cool. But the fact that he actually was the opposite makes him so much more human, relatable, and to be fair, way closer personality-wise to what I was in reality. If I was interested in him as a character once his behavior started to feel off, these moments were enough for me to establish him as my favorite protagonist of all time. But there's something even more important along this revelation. I'm a big fan of Cloud's speeches after this moment in the game when he's back, showing himself now as someone who's very genuine and honest to himself, and instead of being like, "Hey guys, I'm actually not the strong soldier I thought, so good luck with the world's crisis, bye," he instead assumes the consequences that his weakness led to, being responsible for the summoning of Meteor, and decides not to leave the quest, but rather charging ahead with more confidence and conviction than ever before. Most times when you think about redemption, it is the idea of a villain who starts doing good things, etc, etc. That can be satisfying or not. But I personally think that here, Cloud is the character who redeems himself in a beautiful way instead, by assuming the responsibility of his actions indirectly. Not to mention, his new or real personality is actually great. He cares about those who support him, helping Yuffie as they share motion sickness, giving words of encouragement to Tifa when she's doubting herself, and even caring about REEVE when there's a crisis at Midgar. After all, there's nothing he doesn't cherish. I think his speech at the HIGHWIND at the end of Disc 2 is his peak moment, in which he asks everyone to leave the ship and find their reason to join the final fight, acknowledging that every person has their own story and people to care about, and he doesn't want to drag them to his mortal mission that has a very personal attachment to it, aside from saving the world, which sounds very nice. So they stay with Tifa alone, as they have nowhere or no one to come back to but themselves. Again, a character-driven story, solving the protagonist's personal story and the world's in the same instance. Special mention to Zack, who on the other side, fits the role of every shonen protagonist ever. Charming, positive mindset, overcoming obstacles, but met a tragic fate, and personally, I feel that his archetype being a side character and Cloud's being the main one works perfectly and I wouldn't want it other way. In conclusion, in my years as a Final Fantasy VII fan, nothing has been easier than identifying when someone doesn't really know Cloud as a character, as he's a walking red herring for 70% of the game. Cloud's story is one of the most appealing ones in Final Fantasy, but it's the way it's told, with its twist and foreshadow, that makes it brilliant, so no amount of chronological explanation will make it justice. If anything, every time someone tries to explain FF7's story in that way, I think they're doing a disservice to it, ironically. Now, this is a Road to Rebirth video, so I should include what this game so far has shown. And there's some cool stuff in the Nibel flashback shown in the demos around, as they have done a very explicit showcase of how he's projecting himself over Zack in an unconscious way, while also paying attention to Sephiroth's words. and also the guard that is next to Tifa most of the time as we fight normally. So that's pretty exciting, showing that they did not forget about this key main trait about him, that means a lot for his future moments to also appear. Speaking of foreshadows, Final Fantasy VII has a lot once you replay or come back to previous moments, and a lot of them involve the character that was heavily linked to Cloud's story in the last half of his arc, and that is our charming fighter Tifa Lockhart. Tifa's introduction comes after the first mission, being the owner of the bar that we stay at, after 5 years of starting her life over at Midgar, and where Avalanche has its meetings. She is Cloud's childhood friend, and the one to suggest and invite him to be part of the mission as he's a mercenary for hire. After some conflict between him and the rest, she is the one that attempts to make him behave first, but also convince him to join their cause, recurring to their shared memories under the stars we mentioned before. But already at this early stage, we can see her asking him if he's really feeling well, hinting that she's constantly worrying about him for some deeper reason, which we already know. After Cloud softens and decides to start helping her and the rest, she joins in the next mission as our powerful monk. I mentioned with Cloud that how, as a guy myself, I initially liked the idea of putting myself into the shoes of a cool character, even if I cannot relate in real life. And while I'm not a girl, I do love the idea of a female character who's a badass fighter, and in a world where the hero uses a sword longer and bigger than his body, or where the tanky muscular man has a straight up machine gun attached to his arm, she just squares up and has the best animation in the game. All of that while she's the most responsible and calm character. Being a cool fighter doesn't mean that she has the personality of an angry or aggressive person, which sometimes can be linked together. In fact, one of her coolest features is being the grey character who cares and worries about the innocent citizens' well-being and the collateral damage of their actions, in contrast to the very explicit and passionate actions of Barret. Tifa's personal motivation to start the journey are virtually the same as Cloud's. Her town was burned down by Sephiroth, who just appeared once again, and just lost for the second time her home at Sector 7, not having anywhere to go. But if we really pay attention to her, we can notice her reaction to Cloud's version of the stories he told. As the only one to be part of those events in Nibelheim, she can agree with some of it normally, but also will have moments where she seems to be thinking a lot. You know that if someone has a ... text box, something's in their mind. At this point, we know that she's confused about the accurate part of the stories, but how in her head she didn't remember him there. So on her own is trying to figure out why that is happening. And we have many instances of details like this through the journey. In Lower Junon, Cloud has a dream where he talks to a mysterious voice about the past, and questioning why he didn't meet with Tifa if they were friends. A key moment in Gongaga, where meeting Zack's parents would mean for Tifa that he existed, that her memories who were a mess at this point because of Cloud's version of the story might be more accurate than not, which lead to the question of why she doesn't remember Cloud then. At Cosmo Canyon during the campfire, where you can have a talk to her, she is clearly shown hesitant and doubtful in general, being scared of questioning too much, in case that means to feel he would be drifting away too much, and just attempts to ask if he's really him to have some reassurance. Doubts and questions that may make you wonder on a first run, or maybe miss it completely if you think it's too vague. But now that we have context, we know where this is coming from. With a combination of those type of scenes, that are more hints of what will happen than anything, we reach the eventful moment at the northern crater we talked about before, with a new perspective knowing what happens and the truth of these events. We know now that Sephiroth's story to convince Cloud he is not real is not truth either, but the part of him not being there was. That's why Tifa's reaction from the start is to firmly insist and convince Cloud that everything shown is not the case in a panic way, as she doesn't know how to react. She's been avoiding to push this topic too much, even if she attempted a couple of times, because of the fear of what would that mean to him, especially after the latest episodes he had. And she also had her own doubts about the actual events and her version. What she knows is that everything that Sephiroth attempts to do and show is not good. She's put in an awkward situation where what he's showing matches what she thinks it happened, but what he's saying about her childhood friend's origin is not. Everything is just as confusing for her as it is for the player. It's not that she knew every little detail and just pretend she didn't. It is in one moment of weakness where Sephiroth targets Tifa specifically that she couldn't support Cloud from this gaslighting, which allowed him to question himself and eventually break down, as we said earlier. After the meteor is summoned, we have a really cool moment from Tifa's point of view. First, a nice imagery of a defeated broken Cloud walking into the dark carrying his sword, as she tries to run to him, not being able to reach. And then the scene of their reunion, right before the start of the game, where she explains her confusion. While catching up with him, he talks with a lot of confidence about things that happen that he shouldn't know, while not knowing things he should. So she wanted to stay close to him to understand the reason for that, and avoid him drifting away, which explains the previous scenarios along the game. My personal admiration towards Tifa comes in these moments. In our first Cloudless mission, we are imprisoned by Shinra as they are going to execute us for causing the meteor to be summoned, and dumb people can see someone get punished for it. And we have a very exciting sequence of events where the party is distributed all over the place to free us and escape in the airship the HIGHWIND, with the crew betraying the company to follow their idol pilot Sith. This mission would be the ideal perfect chapter 1 of Remake Part 3, but hey, what do I know. Once things settle down and we are at the ship, Tifa has the realization that Cloud is no longer here anymore, and while struggles to keep the spirits high of losing her beloved friend Aerith and her childhood friend when she couldn't do anything to prevent it later, she has the support of the rest of the party to find him once again, and not lose hope. And she has to make sure about everything that happened, therefore to see him again. Tifa deals with the biggest emotional roller coaster in the entire game by far. There's so much confusion in her head from the start, added by the tragic event that hit her both in the past and during the game. She went through Disc 1 with all the confusion about Cloud's odd behavior and her own twisted memories, scared of doing something that would ruin everything, and eventually suffering and not being able to prevent this downfall of her only link to her hometown. And yet, she never got lost in all of it. She refused to stop believing in her childhood memories, especially after what happened when she doubted it for a moment. There's a very significant moment where Barret questions her if she's sure Cloud is her friend and not a Sephiroth lackey, and Tifa goes from a normal "I think so" to a more convincing "I know so", showing her resolution and will to be able to save the shy boy from her childhood memories from his despair. And it's not only during their trip in Clouds of Consciousness, where she guided him very carefully to not push any boundaries, focusing always on how she shouldn't be the one to bring all the answers, but rather she will support and guide him to come to his own conclusions and to take things slowly, without rushing himself to these and eventually being wrong about them. She also spent quite a long time taking care of a comatose Cloud at Midil Hospital, while the rest of the party continue with some missions, putting in danger her own health to prioritize getting some improvements from him. Those who took care of a close friend or family member in sickness could relate and know how hard things can be, to put a strong demeanor to prioritize their health and recovery. This resolution to never give up any faith in Cloud will lead to finally save him by finding himself. And it's important she's the one to do so, because she's Cloud's only link to his real self and the true past. Tifa Lockhart is the proof that the real Cloud existed. In her rich story, her resolution to not lose herself in the middle of everything is an admirable trait of her. From that point forward, Tifa's personal story will be heavily linked with Cloud's too, as they both have a very personal reason to defeat Sephiroth, and they support each other during it, as they only have each other, no family or hometown to come back to. And before the final fight, they share their feelings by having afternoon tea or something like that, I'm sure. Through the course of the game, she has her flaws, with her uncertainties of what to do or not. She's considered someone who locks her sadness and struggles inside of her to not bother the rest. She lost her home twice. She struggles with making the right choices, but still, she bounces and will bounce back again, to join the crew as one of the main heroines despite all of that, making her to me very inspirational and meaningful. And she still is cool as heck though. Her animations in the remake are the best. With this information in mind, Now let's take a look at these lines during some of the Rebirth trailers, and we can easily guess what are they referring to.
Wondering, what's Cloud been doing these past 5 years? Where's he been? This is gonna sound crazy, but as far as I know, Cloud was never in Nibelheim 5 years ago.
You know that I killed her. So, who is she?
With how accurate they are, and how Sephiroth is going hard in the Gaslight, these are things to get excited and look forward to. I have to give them credit for that. One of the mentioned tragedies that happened in her life has to do with a very special friend of hers, and the next character in our list, Aerith GAINSBOROUGH. Aerith is actually shown first, but it's mostly during the intro cutscene, and then a situation where you can interact for one line or not. So it's once you fall into the church she spends her time on, where you can actually meet her and join you officially. She seems to be a simple and playful flower seller in the slums, but for some reason, the Turks, a Shinra organization, arrives and interact with her as if it's common for them to look out for her. Cloud questions this for a bit, but mostly they just escape as she asks him to be her bodyguard and befriend each other in the process, having fun moments and also trying to learn some tidbits about Soldier, as apparently her first love was one too. Once she got in the middle of the conflict while joining to help Tifa and eventually the rest of Avalanche, she gets kidnapped by these Shinra guys while trying to keep Barret's daughter Marlene safe. And we get to know there that the reason they want her is because she's an ancient, a race from an ancient civilization that can communicate with the planet, and are more spiritual connected with nature, that will lead us to the Promised Land, a place known as a legend, which in theory would have abundant Mako energy, and that's why Shinra wants to make use of it. Aerith is a key character to the more external plot and world building of the game, by being the last surviving ancient, or to be precise, the last Cetra. And similar to what we said about Tifa, while she's presented as this pink lady who likes nature and flowers, personality-wise, she's not an obvious archetype because of her looks. In fact, she's more of a sassy and bold person. She teases you and is chaotic in many situations, and that also makes her stand out and be memorable from those first impressions. Saving Aerith was our motivation to raid Shinra HQ, which gets interrupted when Sephiroth decides to show up and cause the journey to start outside of Midgar. Aerith has motivations of her own to tag along too. There is a personal reason behind it, aside from escaping the Shinra people, and it is to learn more about herself and its heritage, as she doesn't have all the answers, and only know they can communicate with the planet and return to the so-called Promised Land. And this is probably the thing that I like the most about her character, that probably isn't talked too much. It's that own personal quest she has, to find out what it means to be a Cetra and what she should do. Her responsibilities, her role, her potential, but at the same time, her struggles to learn and find out all of this. Something she was hesitant to do to begin with, as there's a strong desire in her of wanting to be quote-unquote normal. That is something that is explored a little bit more in Crisis Core. One specific moment that highlights this is one at Costa del Sol, one of my favorites, if not my favorite moment of her character, and it's quite hidden, as every character is doing its own thing, and you may miss it depending on who you got in the party, etc. You'll find her at the inn, already resting at her bed, and we have an interesting exchange. There seems to be a lot of things she doesn't understand, and asks for reassurance about what we think of her. When we aren't able to give an answer, she would show her worries about how she doesn't know who she really is, having an existential crisis at this lovely place. And remember, since her introduction onwards, we remember and know Aerith as this chaotic funny character, so for that reason, to see her like this, for me, is more impactful. A similar thing happens at Cosmo Canyon. This is a place where many people that study the planet live, so it is said that she gets to visit many of the elders, to learn about that and her own race. One would think she'd be excited and at home by learning more about herself, but if anything, she still shows these fears and sad feelings of being alone as the last Cetra, in one of the many emotional moments at the campfire, when Cloud tries to cheer her up that he and everyone else is with her so she doesn't feel alone. She doesn't seem very convinced and is unable to respond. The next big moment like that, before going to the Temple of the Ancients, which is relevant because it's her people, is with the party together collecting information, And Aerith is important for that, as she is the link to the external plot of searching for the Promised Land. There, she has a sudden moment where she's hesitant to say something and just rush over and go to sleep. But in case we unlock the date night, what distinguishes hers, like any other, is the talks at the gondola. The conversations there, you could say that contributes more at Cloud's part of the story and his real personality and mysteries. But there's also an attempt from her to not think of him just as a replacement of her first love who mysteriously disappeared and Cloud is oddly similar to him, but also to consider him its own thing and appreciate him for that. She is doing her best. Although still with many doubts in herself she's been having in the previous locations, she is still considerate enough to pay attention to the others, as we can see. If the combinations of these scenes made you wonder how she's doing, we shouldn't be surprised that Aerith's behavior here at the temple start to get more, I don't want to say weird, but maybe more hectic. Probably excited to learn more about everything, especially herself. There's even a spirit of the ancient that while it's unable to speak, she can communicate with it here. And in my impression, I believe that for the first time in a while, she feels comfortable to be in a place allowed to communicate with her people, that could be the only ones to understand or relate to her, and also trust her by sharing their knowledge and what Sephiroth is attempting to do. At the end of this very interesting looking dungeon, we'll have a meeting here with him, and aside from having a focus on the external plot of summoning Meteor to inflict a wound on the planet, so he can infect it and control the life stream itself, therefore the consciousness, knowledge and power of etc., is also the moment that triggers the first signs of Cloud having odd behaviors that we talked about before. And she's the one to suggest, both here and in the next similar scene, to ignore the topic and insist that everything is fine. We also have here the first sign of a clash between her and Sephiroth, now that the plot and his endgame involves them both. And after this ends abruptly with the mind-controlled Cloud losing it and attacking her instead, we have the dream we talked about, where she leaves Cloud to go do things by herself. And I want to highlight that, after the many moments of struggling and going in circles during most of the journey, while hiding it at sometimes behind her easygoing demeanor, and especially after the visit to the temple where she get to experience and communicate with her people, all of those led to this moment of Aerith taking a drastic decision, that is taking full responsibility of the situation, and as etc., she should be the one to solve and stop this, going ahead to the city of the ancients, as she feels she is led to that place. This one is the most important and determinant decision until now, as she decides to leave everyone to take care of things, and that will eventually lead her to her fatal demise. We of course will follow her and find her at this forgotten city alone, as she has her own mission we are not fully aware yet, which we will know later that she is activating Holy, the spell that it is said will counter and stop Meteor. And while we have to deal with the puppet Cloud close to kill her, after she apparently ends her prayer, Sephiroth makes his appearance, killing Aerith in an instant. And that detail is important, because that snappy feeling is one of the many things that make this moment as memorable as its reputation says so. Pretty much everything has been said about this moment, sometimes even forgetting there's actually a whole half of a game left after it. But if I want to focus on something that I find extremely important in the significance of Aerith's death, is that inspiration the creators had. The contrast with how in games and movies characters would have to sacrifice themselves and die in a dramatic fashion in order to express or protect what they love. And this didn't feel like a realistic representation of death. In the real world, people doesn't die that way. They die of disease or accident. Death comes suddenly with no notion of good and evil. It doesn't leave a dramatic feeling, but great emptiness instead. When you lose someone you love very much, you feel this big empty space and regretful feelings of not being able to do something about it. That is the meaning and reasoning behind Aerith's death, and why it's meaningful to all of us. To bring her back for popular demand, or make her a Mary Sue character willingly sacrificing for a greater good, will just diminish it notable in comparison. Tifa, a character known for understanding every character's feeling at different points, will have later a moment where she makes mention of it. That she wasn't willing to give her life for the planet, but rather, she was looking forward to the future more than anyone else, to a time where she would not feel alone and at peace, One of the core themes of FF7 is related to life, and portraying death as a realistic pain and emptiness, and not for excitement's sake, is one of its biggest elements. So to be clear, Aerith is more than her death. I am not really a fan of people reacting to the first 3 notes of her theme and immediately acting sad. What she goes through in life, and the legacy she got to leave both to her friends in-game and to the players, has more value. There's quite a couple of times when everyone isn't sure of what to do next or feel lost, that they think about her in a good way and think what their next step is. Her actions and words will lead them when they are lost, and her prayer will support them when they go ahead to the battlefield and final mission, spiritually and literally too. At the end of the game, as she is the key character for the external plot of the game, she's going to be still relevant, as while the holy materia she got to activate failed to stop Meteor, her influence and communication with the planet allowed this one to use the lifestream emerging from its core to stop the meteor, as the fate of humanity was in the hands of the planet itself, and presumably Aerith did some convincing for it, and also cinematically coming full circle in a beautiful way. On the Rebirth topic, if I have to be critic with Remake, it's when it focused ironically too much on the external plot and not the character, mostly at the very end. The cryptic conversations for no reason with Sephiroth, even if they never met each other, or everyone following her without question. I was thinking about it as I'm writing this, and it feels like maybe it was too early, as I probably wouldn't mind if this type of thing happened at the Temple of the Ancients, for example. On the other hand, her doubts in her room at HQ and moments like those are the types of things I want to see more. And as we mentioned during the course of the journey, there will be, or should be, more of those. So I'll be looking forward to that. Also, I'm not going to make theories about what's going to happen at the Forgotten City. Most, if not all, ideas that are not the original don't spark me any type of excitement in my bones. But everyone can be happy with their own ideas and wishes, and we can move on to the next character with his own personal path. Barret is technically the first character to be shown in the actual first mission of the game, which will lead us and set up the atmosphere and setting of this intro section. His presentation goes along the game itself, as we are in the middle of a bombing mission to destroy a reactor that is sucking up the Mako, the life source of the planet, and we learn that by Barret's speeches of how they are destroying it that way, in his eccentric and passionate way, in contrast to Cloud's indifference. He can be considered the faction leader of our eco-terrorist group called Avalanche, and the icon for the cause of protecting the planet, while granted taking an extremist stance, going ahead with the bombings and a full offensive decision which will also cause collateral damages. With this last information in consideration, and his behavior during this section, one would think that this is again an archetype of a big, robust and sometimes violent or heated character. But I think his biggest feature makes him very memorable for another reason. Upon arriving at Tifa's bar and seeing a little child, we learn that this is Barret's cute daughter, Marlene, who he treasures and dotes lovingly, as she follows him along the hideout, and have some cute animations along. Eventually showing that of course he has a good heart, and is torn between fighting and caring for his daughter, as he always has her in his thoughts and priorities when things get frantic. On par with his initial motivations, Barret will join the adventure, not only escaping Shinra as he is a known target, but also because the chase and stopping Sephiroth will eventually lead to the overall goal of saving the planet, while Marlene stays at Aerith's adoptive mother's house. And I think one detail to keep in mind here is how he states that he is or should be the designated leader of the crew, while Aerith and Tifa suggest Cloud instead. I know it's protagonist privilege, but trust me, it will be important later. Barret arc and story focus will start manifesting strongly after leaving Costa del Sol and getting into the Coral area. If you have him in your party, you could notice him being oddly hesitant and not being very excited about what's coming. And upon arriving to the Coral village, and from him telling his backstory, we learn how this is where he was from, and back then he trusted Shinra to put a reactor in their village, that eventually would cause an explosion, a burning, and an attack from them to the citizens of course, causing his wife Myrna to die, and where his hatred for Shinra started, even before learning more about the planet itself. As the emotional whiplash leads us to an amusement park next, Barret won't be in the mood to play, so he'll be absent. And we'll find out scenes with dead people murdered by many bullet wounds, and a survivor saying it was a man with a gun for an arm, which doesn't sound very good for us. Once we get to reach him at the desert prison, we get to hear more of his story and how his best friend Dine was with him during the burning, and Scarlet from Shinra attempted to execute them both, which ended up with both losing their arms, and Dine falling a cliff, presumably dead, until now, where apparently he's around and in a rampage. Another nice detail here is that Barret is very adamant of not involving any of us in this conflict, and on the other side, we are not going to allow him to be alone during it, and support him in this confrontation. Once we find him, we have some very impactful moments. We learn that Dine is actually Marlene's real father, who since then thought both his wife and daughter were dead, as he made a grave for both of them here, and along them, Dine lost something else, which was his own sanity, as after learning that his daughter was alive, his reaction is to challenge Barret, as he wishes to bring her where her mother is, in one of the coldest moments of the game. After the fight, Barret tries to convince him to come back to them, but he believes he's too far gone already. His hands are too tainted in blood to hold Marlene, and that even then, she wouldn't be able to recognize him anymore. Therefore, the regretful Dine throws himself off the cliff, after asking Barret to take care of her and to not make her cry. The impact that this moment has for Barret is the most important thing to his character, I believe. A heartbroken Barret for not being able to stop and save his friend lays on his knees and admits that he shouldn't be allowed to hold Marlene either, as his hands are also tainted with blood, which ties to the thoughts about his role in Avalanche, as his actions were very extremist and didn't take in consideration any type of collateral damage because of the explosions. Barret, of course, continued to travel with us, and is excited to reach Cosmo Canyon, a place that not only studies and is dedicated to the planet, but also the place where Avalanche was born, and a moment I think is very important for him. It's a big shift that maybe goes unnoticed. As usual, one of the nicest moments come at the campfire again. Here is where he admits and accepts that his seemingly benevolent cause of fighting for the planet partially covers a personal desire of revenge towards destroying Shinra instead, over the protection of the planet itself, and is something he must come to terms with. It doesn't mean that before he didn't care, but it was behind bigger and more clashing motivations. That's why I think it's very meaningful and admirable of him to realize, admit and redeem that aspect. And what better place to start this new path than at Cosmo Canyon itself, and learning more about it. While that technically closes Barret's arc in terms of personal story, there's a couple of memorable moments in my head that stick with me. First, we have a very interesting exchange between him and Ketchi about this topic. The person who controls the latter, REEVE, works at Shinra, and besides being the only not insane person, his objectives to take care of the people is to work and make the change from the inside of the company, as he develops the urban department and truly cares about them. So we have this conflict when Midgar is in danger, and Barret doesn't seem to care about them, where REEVE confronts him about those damages and death from the bombings, and trigger a discussion of an external clash against Shinra while creating innocents and bystanders to suffer, against working from the inside while having to deal with and accept sketchy decisions, which I find fascinating. Of course, Tifa, being the character who understands everyone, will explain that they will always remember the damages caused back then, and will attempt to always move forward to atone and fight to make things better. In Barret's case, always with Marlene's future as his main inspiration and motivation to keep on fighting, as that's his main cause to come back to the group once Cloud asked them to spend their potential final time with their loved ones. And the other small but significant moment is when we lose both Cloud and Tifa for a while. Remember how at the start of the journey he declares himself the leader only to be rejected? Well, now that we lost our two main guys, as he mentions the need of a leader, he will say instead that he's not the right one for that he realized that he wasn't capable for that position, for all that happened that we talked about, and proposes Sith, the captain of the ship, to be the one, which again also shows a sign of growth and responsibility. Also, shout out to Costa del Sol Barret. In the infiltration mission, he chose to become a sailor, and not only he does look cute, but also can't hide to our sneaky eyes that he secretly likes it, despite the teasing and denying this publicly. Which makes him more endearing overall, to add more reasons to the idea that he's a softie. You know with who he's often queued to? That's our next character. XIII is certainly the odd one out. Well, there might be another one. But we have here a feline-like beast with a canine-like behavior like howling. We met him first at Shinra HQ, specifically at Hojo's lab, where he likes to experiment with stuff. The first impression is that he seems to go on a rampage against Aerith, and we have to save her. But instead, when the room allows it, he jumps straight up to attack Hojo instead, taking advantage of the confusion. What is the coolest part about it? Is that first of all, he talks, that's neat, but then that he was just making everyone believe he was an unhinged monster, just to throw Hojo off so he could counterattack as a surprise. So not only he helps us and joins the fights, but also he shows to be a pretty surprisingly smart and wise friend. Under his fierce exterior is an intelligence surpassing that of any humans. Not to rant too much about it, but the part I dislike the most in Final Fantasy VII Remake is precisely Red's presentation. They make him look like a damn feral beast, that only with the need and power of other magical lady he could regain his calm self, when we know he's pretty serious and smart already. I don't think I'm really sure why he was like that to begin with. But anyways, he will be the last character to start the journey outside of Midgard with us, and his reasons are very simple. He just follows as much as he needs until reaching his home, nothing really deep. During the course of it, we'll still see him being constantly calm and a reliable ally to lean on. With of course some cute moments like the famous unexpected "it's hard to walk on 2 feet" part, and his struggles under the harsh sunlight of Costa del Sol. It's of course in his hometown of Cosmo Canyon that he takes the spotlight, and also we learn more about him. After all, we can't ignore the fact that we are friends with a 4-legged fairy warrior. To begin with, his real name is NANAKI, who allowed us to enter this crowded place that, as we said, is a popular destination for the study of life and the planet. And also that his tribe and ancestors were the protectors of those who appreciate the canyon, so his mission is to stay here to do that. With the particularity that he has high praises for his mother, who died fighting here, but considers his father a coward that ran away. The other family member he has is the elder of this place, Grandpa Bugenhagen, who he has a lot of admiration for. Bugen is an expert who will explain to us in his fancy planetarium the lore of the livestream, and in his first interaction he'll refer to Nanaki as a child. The revelation is that he is actually young, as his development is mentally equivalent to a 15-year-old human. His behavior until now is of someone who wants and pretends to be grown up, but not really, like a child would do. After he takes a step during Bugenhagen explanations about the livestream, he opens up to us, surprise surprise, at the campfire. Mostly about his angry thoughts about his coward father, and as Bugen hears about this, he decides to take us to the sealed cave of the Gi, an ancient tribe at war with the people of the canyon. And as we make progress, he tells us the story of a brave warrior who fought the forces of the Gi to defend and push them out of this land. At the end of it, we discover the petrified body of Nanaki's father, Seto, who alone stood his ground and fought the Gi tribe, protecting the canyon until this day, contrary to what Nanaki thought. But unfortunately, the Gi poisoned arrows turned Seto into stone. After this emotional revelation, and freed of this feeling of shame for his father, Nanaki vows to become a great warrior like him, and proudly declares himself the son of the warrior Seto, which causes his petrified remains to shed tears, and he howls at the moon. During this personal turning point for Nanaki, he has a conversation with Bugen, where he asks him to protect the planet, and for that, the best way of doing it is to remain with Cloud and follow him in the quest to stop Sephiroth and Shinra, as whatever fate awaits for the planet, if there's something they can do, as tiny as it is, they should at least try. When we were about to leave, as Nanaki established that his role is to stay here as a protector, he ran after us, claiming that he wants to keep on going with our quest, stating that he thinks he grew up a little bit, that's why. The child that was pretending to be mature and grown up all the time, now with a more prideful vision, accepts himself and his real age, with many things to learn, a world to explore, and objectives to fulfill, for the future of the planet and the people at the canyon. While maybe impossible to notice for us, His Japanese speech changes a little bit to highlight this change and moment. But even then there are some dialogue changes in some scenarios depending if they happen before or after his arc, to reflect this newfound mindset and growth. There's less of pretending to be mature than the rest of the humans in a demeaning note, and more solidarity from his part and straight up expressing his honest feelings about the situation. A very cute detail, and in respect to that, there are some good news for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I may heavily dislike his beat in Remake's presentation, but I have high hopes for Rebirth, because of one small but significant description they've made so far. Director Hamaguchi was explaining that quests are adapted in case you do them before or after Nanaki's part of the story. As if his arc is finished, his personality will change as we explain, and the fact that they not only acknowledge it, but also make sure to show it given the chance, is a very much appreciated thought and detail from my part. I mentioned Red could be the odd one out of the party, but then I immediately thought, there's a talking cat riding a chunky robot Moogle, speaking to me and forcing himself into the party, so I guess that's unique enough. Granted, I'm trying to make this video about the memorable and meaningful reasons for Final Fantasy VII to be special, and I'm sure most would say that if they can make Cait disappear from this world, they would. But I think there's a couple of things pretty cool to its character, besides the drama that it unfolds. Actually, during his presentation it's completely fine. He's just this wacky character that is like a mascot to the Gold Saucer, and it can be to the game itself, and joins us for no reason other than being curious about his fortune teller, but ends up caught in the middle of a bigger situation during the BARRET arc at the Gold Saucer and Desert Prison. So, oops, he will be with us in there and eventually still part of the group. If someone was at some point suspicious about it, well, they'll feel vindicated, as at the end of the dates that can happen at the second visit at Gold Saucer, we'll find him at the central station acting weird, and we find out he's taking the Keystone, a key item we just got to enter the Temple of the Ancients, and attempts to escape. We reach to him and watch him throwing this key to Song of the Turks, revealing that yes, he is actually a spy from Shinra itself, that infiltrated in our group on purpose, and as we try to tell him to f*** off, he doesn't reveal his identity and proposes to keep on like nothing happened, as he blackmails us, showing us footage of Marlene being kidnapped. The interesting part of it is that he says how he's curious about us and our way of life, how we risk ourselves to continue this journey, and how this made him think about himself and his life. Of course, no one would believe a single word that comes out from his mouth anymore, but this could be the first sign of what's going to happen next. In fact, that feeling of disbelief is going to persist, when we are then in a limit situation to obtain the black materia, learning that only someone who gets crushed inside the temple can unlock it, Cait proposes himself to do so, as there's no other choice even if we don't trust him. When the time for him to go comes, we have this moment of realization that he's sending himself to a suicide mission. This robot cat and Moogle are going to sacrifice themselves. And if we contemplate and pay attention to this moment, allowing us to see with eyes unclouded by hate, this is going to be quite emotional. It's the silly antics that him and Aerith did before it to make light of the situation. It's the music, especially the music. It's how this cat that is 90% of the time doing funny movements looks down and genuinely thanks for believing in him. It's him talking to himself. It's the slow motion tripping and slowly getting up to not lose determination. It's his final words that he can still be useful to the planet and remind us that even if another RoboCat Moogle appears, there's still only one of him, so we don't forget about him. It is surprisingly memorable to me. What I'm trying to say here is, this game can make a side character that at some point you may dislike to make you feel things, even if it is for a second, and at the end of the day with the appearance of Cait number 2, you eventually forget and come back to that feeling of repulse. And also that if Rebirth wants, they can make this sad. Just a little warning. But there's another way this character is more memorable and relevant for the plot. He's from Shinra, yes, but specifically, he's the one sane executive, REEVE TUESTI. After this, he's going to be relevant to save Tifa and Barret from the Junon execution, for example. He's going to become the second agent instead, as he will spy on Shinra to tell us their next plans, takes control of the company orders once Rufus is out, which causes Heidegger and Scarlet to rebel, and attempt to evacuate the people of Midgar when in danger eventually. I mentioned before that one of my favorite moments is his discussion with Barret, as they have this cool clash between going full against those with power that control things but not caring about anyone involved, and changing things from the inside to avoid damages, but clearly with many obstacles in it. Remake has shown both Ketchi lamenting the drop of Sector 7 plate, and more focus on REEVE actions and attempts to stop things, while also constantly working to solve the issues that Shinra and Avalanche are doing, while he cares about the citizens, which is his deal from his position that I always appreciate, so I expect to see more of him too. Also, Cait looks super fun. Sid HIGHWIND is the last character we meet that will join us, if we get the optional characters as soon as they are available. Also, the character that up until today hasn't been revealed for Rebirth yet, which chronologically makes sense. And if I have to talk about his presentation personality-wise, he'll stand out as he's the most unhinged of the crew. He swears constantly, is short-tempered, reacts strongly every time, grumpy and impatient. While he seems to be like that generally, we also learn through his assistant Shera, who lives with him, that he was very close to fulfilling his life dream of reaching space. But an accident on the rocket prevented this at the moment it was going to launch, and either he would kill Shera in the process, who was preventing a potential explosion, or do an emergency stop and wait until another chance arises again. After the incident, she devotes to doing whatever she can to atone for what she considered her mistake, and Sid will behave bitterly and irate over the years as his dream continues to grow more distant and not possible. When I think about Sid, I remember a good description that 4/8 Productions made in his in-depth character video, about how he may be the most relatable character for any of us realistically speaking. Chances are that none of us are superhuman soldiers handling swords, or have a gun attached to an arm as we escape with a 2-year-old adoptive daughter, or animals, but just a guy with big dreams and professional objectives in life that were shattered right in front of his eyes and made him a shell of what he once was? Not saying that's something that happens to all of us, but it's a pretty possible scenario, so that stuck with me. I think it's also important to learn that he overall means well. It's not to consider his aggressive expressions as if he's taking his anger directed at someone like could be Shera, but more of how he expresses himself in crude, unfiltered ways without self-restrictions generally. Also, he's the most unconventional Dragoon ever, and I love him for that. This led me to talk a little bit overall about FF7 characters that make them memorable or at the very least interesting. They are all flawed. None of them are totally reliable all the time about what's the right thing to do and how. We talked about Cloud's whole weakness that led to many catastrophic events. Tifa and her uncertainties of how to proceed with her knowledge and also keeping many emotions bottled up inside. Aerith and her doubts or her heritage make her feel she should carry the burden of everyone by herself as the last Cetra, and taking decisions by herself to be alone led her eventually to her demise. Barret goes through a notorious change from the one-minded objective of destroying Shinra to actually caring about the planet and protect everyone's future. NANAKI pretends to be a mature boy for a while until he starts to be honest with his own feelings after Cosmo. And REEVE or Ketchi, they are straight up a spy before willing to learn about us and understanding that working with us for a brighter future is quite a better choice. And that's great, because, again, who really knows how to act accordingly every time? Not me at least. But also, it means that their journey will make them go through a ton of personal growth and dramatic moments that make them all stand out and make the experience for the player remarkable. In Sid's case, it's indeed his anger-inspired behavior because of the dreams crushed in the past, as he waits for an opportunity to be helpful again and his plan and project to go to space to be a reality. Shinra will attempt to ruin his dreams once again by cancelling any space program and trying to take his own airplane. We will escape with it instead, as Sid follows. And the idea of fighting them is quite appealing to him, and decides to join us in that, as he likes our numbskull attitude, adding an important pilot of many vehicles to the team. His anger is not really conflictive and problematic for the rest. In fact, for us, it's charming to his character and will still remain as part of it. Cait will take quite the lead role during this too though. As the ex-pilot he is, once we are trapped at Junon after Meteor is summoned, is the crew of the airship the HIGHWIND that will see him and fanboy over him, as they should, which led them to betray the company and join their hero instead, and their first job will be infiltrating to save Tifa and Barret from the public execution. Yuffie and Cait will be news reporters, while Cait and crew will take the HIGHWIND itself so they can pick him up, and once up there, he will give some words of encouragement to Tifa, after losing Cloud, and that as long as they have the ship, they can make it anywhere in no time. This new role will make Barret mostly to suggest and declare him as the new leader of the whole group after Tifa stays taking care of Cloud. So suddenly, Cait is acting as our main protagonist, as we control him for a couple of missions, which is pretty cool, because you get to see his eccentric demeanor in contrast to what we were used to until now. And of course, there's also his personal arc, as he is able to close that circle, and maybe accidentally go into space. In a mission where Shinra attempts to use the rocket to destroy the meteor, we ended up inside of it during it, and Cait takes the spotlight in this moment, as it is his thing. And while we have our own objective to avoid using the huge materia, as it has the knowledge of the planet, he'll struggle to what it feels is the right thing to do and what part is fulfilling a personal dream of his, leaving to the player the will to take this huge materia, and also having a moment with Shera, where he will apologize for his behavior and underserved treatment. In fact, once we land and the meteor is still falling, when even the main character feels defeated with no answers, it will be Cait himself, the one to elevate everyone's spirit and motivate everyone to protect this world from the curse and sickness that is Sephiroth, showing a strong sense of determination, and continue until the very end to go through the skies with a ship that will save the world, while still being unhinged, especially if he has to interact with a particular optional character. Yuffie has quite the glow up and spotlight because of the remake continuity, but technically she's still optional in the original game, so there's less of a timeline and more of a personal arc of her in it that you can explore at any time. In terms of her character, this thief and ninja will join us after fighting and demanding rematches like a needy, obnoxious kid, but with a very sneaky plan in hand, which is to eventually steal stuff from us. As a young hyperactive ninja, she'll be more chaotic than anything. It depends when you obtain her, of course, but her lines usually are going to be very mocking, or too much of a complainer, or not sympathizing with some stories for one reason or another, for example, while Barret tells the first part of his story. It's when Yuffie suggests going west for no reason, where by reaching the continent of Wutai, her home place, we know more about her. I'll admit that it's probably that Yuffie is memorable in the minds of FF7 fans for the wrong reasons. It may have to do that she is not only sneaky in her dialogues and chaotic actions, but she actually planned to steal us. And more specifically, all of our materia is gone once we are in the Wutai continent, until we finish her quest. But I promise, the reason for her to do it is cooler than just wanting power and being greedy about it. Wutai is the nation at war with Midgar that turned Sephiroth into the world-renewed hero. This traditional city refuses the implementation of the Mako reactors around the area, but after losing the war, the glorious nation is now turned into a place closer to a tourist resort than something else. This would enrage Yuffie since then, who opposed her father to succumb to this situation, and we are able to witness a discussion between them as we chase her to recover our stuff. While the mission that we are involved in on the first visit doesn't really solve this conflict, and instead we have another cool one that involves us joining the Turks to destroy Don Corneo for once. Side note, I love how they make fun of the idea of an ugly criminal trying to tell a sad backstory to get sympathy, as he gets immediately shot. But later, there's the chance to challenge the pagoda, where the 5 main and more powerful guardians of Wutai will challenge Yuffie to a one-on-one fight, and having a final one between her and her father Godo. That finishes with both of them on the floor exhausted, where they have an interesting exchange about the use of their powers only restricted to this tower, while the others diminish Yuffie's thoughts as she is a child. At the end of this discussion, they come to an understanding. In Godot's words, strength without determination means nothing, and determination without strength is equally useless. And also that she should join us in our party for the sake of Uday. And also to steal some shit. Like father, like daughter. She even attempts to make Cloud sign a contract that says that she will keep the materia once the fight is over at the end, which I find pretty funny. I'm someone who loved Yuffie even in the original. Having no materia didn't really make me go crazy. Spamming only attack still worked for me, and Uday was pretty heckin' cool. But hey, I'm glad that the impression she already gave people and will probably still doing is of an endearing, entertaining character, with one of the coolest gameplays shown so far. Along with Yuffie, we get a second optional characters after one cool puzzle at the Shinra mansion in Nibelheim. The always appealing and walking horror trope reference, Vincent Valentine. He is found sleeping in a coffin for 30 years after all. Also he's immortal. And he'll join us because he has more information about Sephiroth's origin and Hojo's role in it, so he feels it's his responsibility to tag along. Vincent is oddly similar to Cloud, although more mature for logical reasons. They are both ex-Shinra employees with some personal hate towards Hojo specifically, who even later have a strong sense of self-guilt of the tragedies and people they lost. Najima referred to him as a loner character that while he is supposed to be the silent type, when he does speak, he still tends to do a lot. As an optional character, he won't have his specific mandatory time to shine, but still he has his own past story and backstory that works as complementary to the rest of the world and characters in cool ways, exploring moments that are attached to key characters like Sephiroth himself, and also you have to find those moments, so gameplay wise it makes it gratifying to find after some exploration. The most important scene in question is the flashback to Sephiroth's birth. We are aware that Sephiroth's mother is Jenova, but while meeting a crystal cave where the scientist Lucretia is in, we also learn that she is the one who gave birth to Sephiroth while being part of an experiment. During Vincent's past as a Turk, he followed her and the other professors like Gast and Hojo to the project about Jenova, and both Hojo and Lucretia plan to give birth to their child while adding Genova's cells to it, therefore Sephiroth's birth. Vincent was also in love with her, so even if he accepts their decision, while learning about the experiments that are killing her, he regrets not being able to stop their plan and the consequences that eventually will have. When confronting Hojo, he got captured and experimented, making him the monster he is today. And back in the present, he lies to Lucretia about Sephiroth being dead, as the Jenova inside her doesn't allow to rest in peace, and the image of her child attempting against the world haunts her. I think there's potential to make things sad and regretful there. While completely optional and out of the main story sequences that focus on him, still he is extremely beloved and memorable because of this presentation and charming actions, and one of the highlights of Rebirth marketing so far. Also he's a softie. Despite his cold personality, he's not uncaring. When Cloud thought Vincent does not care about the planet, he states that it's just how he is, and apologizes for the false impression. He's also Marlene and Yuffie's favorite victim, so that's cute. Speaking of details like that, let me talk about one more thing about why these characters make this game so special. I tried my best to talk about why every character is memorable inside their enclosed story that might or might not connect to the external plot in some way or another. But there's also something special that happens in between all of those that is super important in my eyes for character-driven stories. And it's the interaction and relationship between these characters that slowly create a strong bond, often called a found family. Even when this is a game where the small cutscenes will have the characters on the party present and the rest are hidden, the idea is that, of course, during the journey they form a closer bond, and it shows in many moments. For example, we talked about Cloud's big journey by itself, but during it there's also a noticeable growth between the first missions of the game, where him and Barret scream at each other, and how slowly they become close allies, who trust and have each other's backs. When Cloud first loses himself, it's him and Tifa who stays with him until he wakes up and reassures him that if it happens again, they will be there to help him. The remake did a great job at showing that in Midgar only already. Then there's the relationship between Cloud and Tifa that is obvious and extensive as heck. It could be a video on its own if we include compilation stuff, as they have a relationship that goes since they were like 5 years old until 23 and counting, but their individual arcs cover those moments already. The main character having these interactions might be a given, that's why other friendships are sometimes very exciting to see, like Tifa and Aerith friendship for example. If anyone wants to make you believe that these two are enemies, because reasons that sounds more from a high school backyard than from real life, then don't believe them. No one suffered more the loss of Aerith than Tifa. And it's cute how you can see them being together at different times when the party splits. Some moments I find endearing can be everyone refusing to leave Barret to deal with his conflict with Dyne alone. Not to mention Tifa is basically Marlene's adoptive mom now, so they have a fraternal bond. When Cait decides to sacrifice himself and no one knows what to say, Aerith distracts him and keeps the spirits high, and in response he will be very happy about her words of encouragement. Everyone's support to Tifa once she takes the lead to find Cloud once again, and also how they care for her when she is pushing herself too much into taking care of his comatose body at the hospital. Once Cloud is back, one of his aspects of his personality is his motion sickness, something Yuffie also suffers, so they have a very cute moment where he shares his experience to feel better about it, giving me siblings vibe. When they decide to go help Reeve and Cait at Midgar, to not leave him alone in his attempt to save the people from Hojo, everyone jumps right into the mission with no hesitation. Or how at the end, when Cloud has his beautiful speech about leaving the ship, as he doesn't want to force them to go to a mortal mission without seeing their loved one first, even if that means not coming back, as it would be reasonable for them to stay with their loved ones instead, and not risking their lives for a cause that they are not sure to succeed. And yet, they all come back, for their own reasons, but also having a strong bond and trust between each other. Even the HIGHWIND crew gets happy with that, how can I not? And of course, all of them have a very specific reaction to Aerith's death. Tifa caresses her cheek until she breaks down and leaves running. Barret laments the fate of the girl who sacrificed her own safety to protect his daughters at Midgar and consoles a young Cloud. Red howls as a sign of respect that Final Fantasy XVI taught us that can be emotional already. Cait attempts to interact and acts with energy to keep the spirit, but realizing he can't keep with the act, it lowers down his head and leaves defeated. Yuffie, the youngest member, won't be able to stop her tears and hug Cloud in consolation, and while she attempts to take deep breath to calm down, she won't be able to take it anymore and run away breaking down. And see that Vincent approach is of the reliable adult, with much experience that condole the other's grief, and lament the tragedy that is the loss of a young person. Having suffered the loss of someone special to everyone solidifies your bonds without realizing, as you have that special thing that only you know how it feels and you can relate to each other. And again, her spirit and memories will help them when in need. And those details are always something nice to see in games with party members like this one. And granted, this is not something that only FF7 does. I think a big reason why Final Fantasy VI is beloved by many, including myself, is this exact reason. It was a pioneer of having each character its own time to shine and have meaningful stories of their own, along with the interaction of a fan family. I still remember how adorable was the moment where everyone joined to find Gao some nice clothes to meet his father, and something that made me lack, for example, in the following Final Fantasy VIII. As much as I love it, most of the party members have the same shared story during the younger orphanage days, which it makes the focus of Squall and Rinoa moments to shine more over the rest, in my opinion. I don't have any intentions to demand what the remake must or must not do and change. I don't really have reasons to. But when the first reveal trailer has moments like, what's Sephiroth's endgame? I genuinely don't care, as I feel that's not the most important aspect of the game in my eyes. I mean, I haven't talked too much about the main plot in this video, and I've been talking for like 2 hours. So while I welcome the new stuff added to complement the original, I will focus appreciate and enjoy it deeply as long as there's the meaningful and important world building, characters' individual moments and emotional journeys, and their fun and enjoyable relationships and interactions, as I think that's why it matters so much to most of us. Thank you very much for watching, enjoy some Final Fantasy, and I'll see you later. Love you.